Welcome. Welcome to this session on thick data as part of our 22nd annual CIO Leader Conference. This is a masterclass, as you know, by two eminent speakers who have been there, done that, thought of new ideas, have implemented that. So I'll just give their brief profiles before I hand it over to you present. Any questions that you have, you can ask in the chat box that is provided to you, and which I'll take up, or the speakers will directly take up and answer. So before I ask them to start, let me just read out the brief profile. See, of course, Akash, those of you who are readers of CIO Leader know him very well. He writes the popular Silly Point column in the magazine. He also writes for Economic Times. Both the speakers are from MBS from XLRI Jamshedpur. Akash is experienced in the business application IT industry in India and USA, designed and implemented solutions for MSME to Fortune 100 companies, led board management company as CEO of MasterCard, CTO, Reliance Retail Finance, experience in digital transformation with 3 decades of transformation in over 20 countries across 4 continents. Vijay is a transformation leader with 33 years of experience. He also led board managed companies as Group CEO, SEK Media Group and Alia Group, pioneer in digital transformation with 3 decades of frontline achievement in adapting new technologies to business, in corporate strategy and executive officer to the chairs of Time Group and Z Group, and co-founder of Incubator, advisor to founders and entrepreneurs. And he is also a columnist on Future of Business and an academic consultant. Of course, I can just read out the basic information points. You will experience yourself their immense knowledge and insight into the subject that they are presenting, and the new concept that they're introducing on thick data. So over to you, Akash and Vijay.
Thank you, Shyamanujay. Thanks for the kind words, and good afternoon, everyone. So Vijay is sharing his screen, so I will keep saying next, and we can do that. And between me and Vijay, we will be switching things around, right? So what we're going to do in this session is we'll talk about thick data, what it is, how is it implemented, what it means, and what are some use cases of corporations like yours, and how you as IT leaders can also choose the path to go through that. So yeah. So I'm Akash, and that's Vijay. Shyamanujay has given an extensive, kind introduction, right? So let's start with a video, and the relevance I'll explain later.
I think we can all relate to watching a movie about World War II. Seeing airplanes going down left and right at the slightest damage. Have you ever thought about why that is? Or why can't we make them tougher? The first solution that comes to mind is putting armor on the plane. Reinforcing a plane is relatively simple, and armor is commonly used practically everywhere. However, we run into the minor problem that an airplane covered by armor, like a tank, can't take off. So where should we put that protection? The exact same question was floating in the heads of the British commanders in the Second World War. They had data on the planes that returned home and where they were hit. The suggestion was made to put armor where the most bullet holes are, since that is apparently where the planes are being hit. The less holes, the better, right? Well, not exactly. Vald Abraham, an expert of statistics, suggested that they reinforce the parts that sustained little to no damage. But why? Simple. Because unlike him, the brass was committing a logical error known as survivorship bias. In simple terms, survivorship bias is the tendency to only focus on the survivors instead of everyone. Sometimes that means you only see the winners, not the losers. At other times, it means you only see the rich and the successful, but not the thousands who also worked hard but failed. The same applies to our airplanes, since the only ones we can observe are the ones that survived and returned home. We don't know where the planes that didn't make it home were hit. So instead, what we can say is that the damage that was done to the planes that returned home wasn't fatal. We don't need to reinforce those damaged parts. Instead, focus on the unscathed parts of the plane and reinforce those. After it's explained, it seems so simple and obvious. Yet the commanders still didn't notice their fatal flaw. Does that mean that we are probably committing the same mistake in many decisions of our lives? It absolutely does.
Yeah, you'll have to, yeah. So the point of that video is about the bias, right? It's not, this talked of survivorship bias, but we're talking about the bias that can get introduced within the way we look at the data. That itself can become biased, right? So the concept of thick data is actually very simple. Big data gives you data insights. Thick data gives you human insights. So that, and like it said, let's not look at the obvious thing. Big data will give you the obvious and the trends. Thick data will point towards different things like qualitative research, right? So we combine the two, and I'll talk about this a little later also in detail. It gives a holistic perspective and you get very high quality results, right? Like I put a quotation down there, it is a collaboration between data scientists and qualitative researchers or social scientists, right? They analyze data for qualitative insights and behavioral cues. Right, next. So I'll let Vijay take over from now, and I will join back. I will start after some time.
Thanks, Akash. The idea of thick data, as we understood, is the incorporation of human insight with big data. Now, to understand where this new or emergent phenomenon has come from, it's actually an evolution from the world of philosophy. Thick as a concept, or thick description as a concept, was proposed by a philosopher named Gilbert Ryle in 1949 to give contextual understanding to a phenomenon. The difference between thick and thin is very simple. When you are dealing with some qualitative aspect, such as understanding human behavior, you can do two things. You can observe from a distance, or you can go and participate in that phenomenon. So if you're observing shoppers in a retail store passively, that is a thin description, but yet you are making some qualitative judgment that is not available from secondary data. Thick part of this is when you go and start talking to that customer and asking them how they feel, how they perceive, or what are their various motivations. So thick is the interaction with the consumer to understand more about it. But this second part was what Clifford Geertz, the famous cultural anthropologist in 1973, gave an application orientation to. So from philosophy, it became an applied science where thick was developed from thin. And finally, and what matters to us most is how Tricia Wang in the 2000s mainstreamed thick data and connected it with data science through her Nokia smartphone insights. Now, this is a very interesting story. And we all know enough about Nokia's inability to read the signals, right? And this is a very classic case of ignoring insights and relying on historical secondary data. Tricia Wang did something very different. In 2009, as part of Nokia, she went to China. And in China, she was asked to, she on her own actually chose to study the behavior of the lower income segments in China. So what did she do? She observed and talked to rural migrants. She set up a shop as a street vendor. She worked inside internet cafes, and in her interactions with the lower echelons or the lower income segments of society, she wanted to understand what was their perception towards mobile phones and how would they interact with mobile phones. Now, interestingly, she developed an insight that the lower income groups, contrary to what head office felt, were actually willing to pay a small premium or a significant premium also to enjoy the benefits of a good smartphone. She took this insight, which was actually eventually based on 100 qualitative interviews. She took this insight and went back to Nokia headquarters and presented it to them, saying, look, it seems that we have an opportunity to introduce smartphones and to reposition our strategy to build smartphones for the lower segments. But she was ruled out outright for multiple reasons. The first was a very simple reason, which the quantitative types say that, look, you have just 100 sample size. We have millions of data points. Nowhere in those data points can we find anything about insights on, poor or lower income groups wanting to use smartphones. We'd prefer to put our energies behind the elite group. Secondly, they also felt that cultural insight from China cannot be extrapolated. 100 people in China doesn't become a global insight. So they continue to focus on the quantitative data because they didn't understand how to use the non-linear data, where you can't convert that insight into numbers in any practical way. So this was how Tricia Wang interacted with data science from the big data side, and she felt that there is a lack of thickness in applying big data to consumer insights. And she became the first evangelist of thick data and thickness as a construct to be used in data science. Now, this was a nice way for us from this evolution to also go into 3 case studies. But before that, Akash is my timekeeper. Akash, are we good on time?
Yes, we are. I did want to add a sentence
Please.
about this story. So basically, this story highlights the fact that big data is showing some trends, right? They're seeing big data of small, low-end phones, and they were a pioneer of 1,000 rupee cell phone. And the minority data, which is outside of big data, is what becomes thick data. And I will talk about how to use thick data. Back to you, Vijay. And I keep switching my video because of connectivity issues. So I'll come back.
Thanks, Akash. Not a problem. Okay, as long as you're there, it's fine. So from here, I will take you through 3 case studies. What we're doing is we are curating the story, this subject for you. It's a vast subject and it has many nuances. So what we're trying to do is give you a flavor of many of these things. So from the beginning or the history, we'll go into 3 use cases which have different contexts of how data science and thick data work together. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Netflix. What we are doing here also is we're trying to use cases which you will be able to relate to easier and it is simpler. It's not that they can't be used in other contexts. So everybody knows the story that Netflix is the inventor or the owner of the binge watch concept. And I would believe that virtually no one in this forum would not have binge watched something from Netflix, whether it's Family Man or House of Cards or whichever one that we like watching. The interesting thing is, how did all this happen? So Netflix is known for its algorithmic science, right? Everybody knows that Netflix uses data to create algorithms which drives viewership. And it has used big data brilliantly to manage and create value in every part of the content value chain, from the sourcing of content to the interaction with the consumer. Now, the binge watching story is about how Netflix managed to mainstream this concept. Okay, we must remember that a small background is required for this. Before it started binge watching consciously, Netflix was always aware that its model is very different from those of traditional television companies. So traditional television company, what they do, they aggregate all the audiences at one point in time. At 9 p.m., you watch KBC. So the entire effort is to bring as many people as possible for appointment viewing at 9 p.m. Netflix, on the other hand, had a different business model. It had a huge inventory spread across genres, geographies, languages, and so on. It was not based on appointment viewing. So the Netflix question was, how do we also ensure that we maximize the amount of viewing for our content? So then these are accidental things. All these things don't happen. Many of the starting points of these phenomena don't happen naturally. Binge watching, if you go back, I'm taking a couple of unrelated points and joining them in the end. So please be patient. So one was Netflix trying to understand how its disaggregated content model competes with the appointment viewing model. Second point is binge watching already existed. Binge watching began actually when when the CDs used to be coming as a pack. So you had Friends or Seinfeld or some TV series for which the entire season or all 8 seasons, 9 seasons would be available in a CD pack. So people had already started experimenting with the idea of watching successive programming. Then Netflix also, when it started putting content together, it started buying shows, old shows, which had already finished. So you had all the 8, 10, 5 seasons available, and people had started binge watching. What Netflix data started telling it is that, yeah, we are seeing an increased uptake in the number of people who are doing this. But they wanted to do something very strategic. The big data was not telling them how from that point can they do something with this. They knew it was there, but what should we do? So they set 3 objectives. They said, 1, let's try to understand how viewers feel about binge watching and what are the behavioral dynamics. 2, let us then use this information to actually make viewers comfortable and eager to adopt binge watching as a mainstream activity. It was important for them to remove the guilt associated with binge watching, as if it's some kind of addiction or a negative habit, whereas it should become a positive habit. It also was important for them to use consumer insight to tell the whole world that, hey, you must binge watch, and if you don't binge watch, you are doing something wrong. So they wanted actually to go and do this. The third thing they wanted to do was to convince TV producers, look, if you're going to do binge watching, then it's better you come on our platform than give it to television stations, because we'll guarantee that huge numbers of people will watch your program once and again and again and again. So they were competing actually for programming, because a TV producer would produce a show. He had the option of giving it to Netflix or giving it to NBC or giving it to Warner Brothers. So the idea was, if Netflix can catch most of those shows through the binge watching USP, it would be great. So what they did in 2013 is they hired a cultural anthropologist called Grant McCracken to go and visit binge watchers' homes and to understand from them what they do, how they feel about it, and so on. And as I said, they were consciously wanting to take this report and tell the whole world about it, not just keep it to themselves. So they did this, and they found some very surprising insights, including the fact that we relate today ourselves as binge watchers, the fact that it brings unrelated audiences together. A boss and the youngest subordinate in the office may talk together about the fact that they love Family Man, or they watch some cult show, or there's some Master Chef. It brought together families. It changed the way people ate food or interacted on many other aspects of their daily life. So all this was the finding that McCracken did with his 3,000 odd subscribers that he studied in the US. They also found that people want to be prompted. Why don't you try watching one more? And it will automatically take you to the next episode, even without your waiting. So they found that people were actually enjoying it, and they promoted it. As a result, today, Netflix has totally owned to a large extent, a lot of this content came. Of course, others now like HBO Max are picking up the game. But binge watching has become mainstream and successful and accepted because of this inciting that they did. They saw the big data, but they went into a thick data process to make everything kosher. If I were to quote their chief content officer, Ted Sarandos, and I'll just read from here, he says that there is a 70-30 mix. For him, the secondary data, which is big data, is 70% of the decision making, but the 30% inside forms the top layer for him when he takes decisions. So the 70 brings the information there. The 30 then is the secret sauce that makes it work. So that was Netflix. If you're wondering that, "Arey bhaiya, ye to jana pehchana gyan de rahe hain," they're giving stuff that we already know. So I thought I'll take a chance and tell you about something that I have done personally, which is the story of Zoom. Zoom was the first of the channels of Times TV network, which now consists, as most of you who watch television would know, includes Times Now, Movies Now, ET Now, and so on. So this is the year 2005-06 when the first channel of that network, Zoom, had started. It was from a print-based company, but Times of India Group, who were not experienced about television and so on. So what it was, Zoom was essentially an experimental channel modeled around Bombay Times, Delhi Times. It is basically a Bollywood and celeb-based content channel with a variety, like a kind of a Belpuri of content. The attempt was to bring the Bombay Times, Delhi Times flavor onto television. However, after a year of that and a lot of money, it was proven to be unsuccessful in every possible way. Essentially, there were no viewers, and in television, if there are no viewers, there's no income. So management was keen to get this right, and they gave it to our team to turn it around. So our first stop was big data. Now, TV programming, as you may know, is very data-driven. And we have seen recently the scandals of TRP and BARC and all that. So the viewership data is available every week in the form of what I will use for the sake of this a simple word, TRPs, right? There is TRP data. And then there is supporting data from print readership called the IRS survey, which is a very large amount, 2.5 lakh data points are there. And it's almost like a mini census. That supporting data is there. And right at the bottom, there is the actual census data available. So if you're a television programming strategy person, you have this weekly data and you have this annual data and you have the decadal data available for you to look at what to do. So we saw all this, and then we went through the TRP data and found this kind of an anomaly. We found that one of the leading music channels of India was showing unusually high ratings, especially in the mornings and afternoon, when you wouldn't expect any TV channel, even any time of the world, to be showing on weekdays, to be showing any high ratings. So we wanted to know, is this an outlier? Is this a data collection error? Because often these TRP data tend to be lossy. They don't tend to be good. So we verified the veracity of that data, that, yeah, this is genuine and it's happening over time. And then we went into thick data. We said, Abhi, we can't do anything more. What is thick data for us? We went straight to, the source. We went to that television company. Since we are all from the same game, we know the people there. And we said, what is happening here? And then we found something very shocking. We found that the entire top management had left overnight, literally, of that music channel. So there was nobody running the music channel. And the young people there who were left behind, they were told, just keep it going for a few weeks till we find some solution. So what they did was they just, in the absence of any strategy, money, plans, they just kept running music videos for which they had rights. Now, this is the interesting part. Okay. Because music was being played non-stop, what was happening in the home was that homemakers were not tuning off from the music because they thought of it like radio. Acha gana baj raha hai, for 2-3 hours we are listening to it, it's good. Who doesn't want to listen to non-stop music? If you turn on an FM, you don't get that also. Even in FM radio, every third minute you will be breaking off for an ad or something and then coming back. So we found that because continuous viewing was going on because somebody accidentally had left the content in such a way that it was just playing on a loop. People were hearing it more like a radio rather than watching it. Who? The homemakers. This was happening in the morning and afternoon. Now, as everybody knows, TRP is directly proportional to the amount of time you watch. The more a channel is watched, the more TRPs it gets. So it's a multiple of the time spent, which is the amount of time a viewer spends, and the number of viewers. So if you aggregate the two, you get a very large amount of TRPs. And that's what was happening to this channel, that while its number of viewers were not increasing, the existing viewers were watching a lot of it because of this accident. So we took this information back to our management and said, look, what we understand from this is we need to immediately become a Bollywood music channel. And that's what we did. Overnight, we became a Bollywood music channel. Now, we did two things. We introduced the idea of non-stop music in television with this. And secondly, we also started playing movies in the afternoon, because movies occupy a large chunk of time. People don't switch on to a movie and get away in 3 minutes. They'll watch at least half an hour, 40 minutes. So it increases the viewership. Now, within, I would say, I don't remember exactly, a few weeks of this changeover, we had an enormously positive impact, both on top line and bottom line. Because our TRP started zooming, we hit the top 10 TRPs of all entertainment channels in India. Now, if you're in the top 10, means you get a significant share of ad revenue. So advertising revenue started flowing into the channel because of this. Secondly, bottom line, we were able to throw out all the old content, and the cheapest content that you can run on television is licensed movies and licensed music videos. So we were able to bring down our budget by, I don't know, I would say, I don't remember exactly now, but maybe 70-80% we would have brought down our budget. So if we had a budget of 20 crores, it became just 3 crores or 4 crores. So between the top line and the bottom line, we were able to turn this channel around. This was a very, very clear and very old case of thick data intervening because there was an anomaly available in the big data. So that triggered an insight. The third case that I'm going to is probably more relevant. Akash, how are we on time?
Yeah, I was just going to intervene saying you have about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes left because I need 10 minutes at the end.
Okay, so we are almost there.
We are good. On the case two, if you can go back to that slide for a minute.
Yes, please.
Right. Yeah, so I think, you know what, let's do all the cases and I'll talk about them together. Sorry, go ahead.
All right. So just to recap, the first case was Netflix, where you went beyond big data. The second case was Zoom, where we looked at data anomalies which trigger an insight. The third case, which is more closer to where we are today, is about agile insights powering big data to real-time solution. In this day and age, in most categories of business, it is not required to educate anybody in this audience that time is of the essence. Everything is real time. Things are changing fast. So big data, its value comes from the speed with which you can use it. So this is a case about how they have brought agile insights to power big data virtually on a real-time basis. And the case is about a platform called Motherboard from a company called Woom.D, which is now owned by Infosys, which essentially focuses only on doing this. So it's a video which I will introduce and then talk briefly.
The board is our always-on, engaged community of thousands of mums who are eager to share their thoughts and opinions to help brands shape consumer experiences. Here's how it works. Upon registration, we gather demographic information about our mums. They create a profile and customize it to their comfort. Single mums? Check. Mums with nursing infants? Check. Mums who manage the household finances? Check. Mums from around the world? Check. We screen for a custom set of qualities important to the brands we work with to ensure we can provide a diverse panel to provide actionable insights. They complete surveys, video diary studies, ethnographies, shop-alongs, moderated and unmoderated groups, discussion forums, and more to earn points in which they redeem for gift cards, which keeps them coming back for more. Our team of strategists then analyze the responses using tools like our Insights platform, which allows us to transcribe video interviews with ease, search for keywords within lengthy responses, and also understand positive, negative, and neutral sentiments on a topic. This automation cuts our turnaround time in half, and paired with a human touch, it leads us to the actionable insights that drive your business forward. This is our Agile Insights practice that brands can tap into at all stages of innovation. This is the motherboard.
So that was motherboard. Now, motherboard essentially deals with the time lag between field research and existing big data. So big data is coming all the time, and as its definition goes, whether it's its velocity or its variety, it's happening real time and it's pouring into the organization. Now, if you find that there is an insight to be done now, qualitative research typically takes time. There will be a significant time lag between somebody going and doing the research, doing the field work, coming back, and then trying to make an insight and connecting it to the big data and finding a solution. The second problem is that there is market change happening rapidly. So you need to do real-time decisions based on the information available to you. Big data may be telling you today that Instagram is the place to go for a particular kind of audience. And then you go and do qualitative research for 4 months and come back and find that that audience has already moved like shifting sands to TikTok, right? So I'm obviously making an example which is to just drive home the point. But the point is, the second thing is consumer behavior is changing, and the way in which people are picking up and dropping trends is quite significant. So qualitative studies also need to keep pace with the data insights. The third one is you need follow-up and what I would call continuous monitoring. There are categories of businesses where you need to keep following up and understanding how, because purchasing or interaction may be a continuous basis. And it is also very true in B2B situations where it's not a one-time but a continuous activity. So, this sort of it connects with an old Greek philosopher called Heraclitus, who once said that no man can cross the same river twice because he's neither the same man nor is the river the same, which means that change is constant. So what Motherboard is trying to solve is this problem. It is trying to create an agile insights platform, or it is an agile insights platform, an engine where it creates an online community which engages with a particular audience. In this case, we've seen the example of how it was used. The engine was called Motherboard and it was used for US moms. Now, interestingly, the research was done that US moms constitute influence 85% of household purchase decisions across categories. And therefore, they are the single most important target group for many consumer-focused businesses. So this platform was done to understand real-time what modern mothers feel, what drives them, and across categories, so that you have, as the video said, single moms and moms who stay at home and working mothers and so on. So this feedback is coming continuously, and these supply answers to the questions that are being raised from the big data that is coming. So they have gone to the extent of saying that within 48 hours, a new idea can be launched on the platform, responses gained, observations made, and that idea can then quickly move to the marketplace or to a more robust launch platform. So here are 3 examples of how thick data works with big data. And Akash wanted to come in at this point. So Akash.
Yeah, thanks. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Yes.
Yeah. So a thick data process has 3 essential features, and I will talk about my experience with thick data. And here's the interesting thing. What Vijay talked about Zoom, they did not use the concept of thick data. They just used the principle without calling it thick data. And the same thing happened with me. As I talk through this, I'll talk about that. So there has to be a culture of collaboration, right? Which is, if we talk about Nokia, There was no collaboration. The ethnographer, and ethnography is basically a merger of social science and data science, right? The ethnographer employee of Nokia came back, and the rest of IT said, "Oh, you know what? You have got 150 interviews in China. We have some 10 million points of data, and we know how quickly smartphone took over the world after iPhone was introduced, right? So, and then you have to also collaborate with field workers, which is what Tricia did, right? And then statisticians, socialists sit down and do something together. Then there has to be free communication channels, right? So what that means is that people should be able to talk. Now, when I give my own personal example, I'll talk about this also. In case of Netflix, there was total free communication. The ethnographer came back with an idea, and the IT team said, "Okay, let me validate this against this. Oh yeah, we have a lot of binge watchers, and maybe they will binge watch the new shows also, right?" And then the agile process. You have to really move fast. Again, going back to Nokia, one of my favorite stories. I'm a big fan of Tricia Wang, and so Nokia did introduce smartphones, but they had missed the bus by the time they introduced the smartphone, and we know where Nokia stands today, right? So let's do one thing. Vijay, let's go to next slide, and let's invite some comments while I share my experience with, and then go back to previous slide. If you can introduce what we are asking people to do in the chat box.
So thanks, Akash. Since we can't see you and we can't interact physically or otherwise, we thought we'll poll and source some views and inputs, specifically that how has your interaction been as a CIO with the qualitative insights part of big data? Do you have any feelings and views on it? On the other hand, has this or in the past given you thoughts on how you can use insighting to improve the quality of data and its or rather the quality of data's use? So if you want to throw some questions on the chat, I'm sure our colleagues from CIO will share them with us on the chat screen we have here.
Yes, so far we don't have any question, but so you can go ahead.
Yeah, so we'll give a couple of minutes pause here maybe, so that if somebody has a question, they can raise it. What do you say, Akash?
Yeah. And during the pause, let me talk about my experience. Again, I'm talking about well before Tricia Wang came out with the story of Nokia. She left them, and then she, I think, consulted with Netflix. That's where the story came. So in any case, so I used to be the CTO of a very large retailer about 10, 12 years back, or 15 years back. And they were growing very, very rapidly, right? So within 6 months, we had 5 million registered shoppers, right? And we used to sit in an IT department, basically looking at data and mostly at financial data. We were focused on that. The retail itself, the logistics, supply chain, IT, was a separate CTO. So one day, one of my team members came to me and said, "Sir, normally milk and sugar are bought together. We have identified 50,000, only 50,000 people in Mumbai, which had a membership of 2 million, who have stopped buying sugar, right? They're just buying milk. Suddenly, after buying milk and sugar, and which we are seeing in the data, is a very consistent thing. Milk and sugar are always bought together. Don't ask me why, right? It's not for me to question that. Suddenly, we have 50,000 people. So I went to the head of retail. I said, "Look, we have this data." Now, he was busy expanding, opening new stores, campaign, categories, all kinds of stuff. So he didn't really say, "Okay, yeah, I will think about it." So that is where the collaboration and free communication, right? I mean, I did not first talk to the retail head as a CIO, CTO, and say, "Hey, let's explore some of these things." Suddenly, out of the blue, I pop into his cabin and say, "Hey, this is what we found." And he's like saying, "Look, I'm opening 10 stores tomorrow. Let's not talk of 50,000 people. I'm looking to acquire 1 more million customers, right? So then I had to sit down slowly. It took me some time. It took me a month, and we kept tracking the data, right? Because Indian customers are value customers. People don't mind going to multiple shops doing the same grocery shopping, right? And that's what we were seeing. So I went to him. I said, "Look at this data. Here it is, right?" And so one day he peacefully sat down, and that's when the free communication started, right? He said, "Oh my God, let's run a campaign." So I shot out same day, next morning. I ran a campaign of SMS to those 50,000 customers only, saying tomorrow between 3 and 4, sugar is 50% off for you if you show this message. So in that 2-hour window, we had about 30,000 customers show up buying sugar. Those customers, because we were tracking it. Now we knew the list of customers with the customer ID, right? We were tracking that, right? I'll give you another example of that. So of the 5 million customers, the people are registering, buying membership card, not buying, taking membership card and then swiping it to gain points. And another time, I said, okay, let's do a demographic analysis of this number. They have given demographic data. Now we have started to notice that the salary of this guy is 10,000 rupees and is buying colored peppers and asparagus and broccoli, expensive, fancy, exotic vegetables and fruits, right? So that became a very interesting thing. So then I personally went, and my team, we stood in the shop with the checkout counter. I said something is wrong. And we came back and found out that the registration has been done by the driver or cook or household help in the name of the Mem Saab. And he's, in his own name, and he's putting his income and he's doing the shopping for Mem Saab. And he's getting the points himself. Mem Saab doesn't even know that there's such a thing as points. Or if she knows, she doesn't go grocery shopping. She doesn't go to buy milk, sugar, and sabji bhaji. Right? The driver or the cook. Now, if we had not noticed that anomaly and observed it, we would have never realized it. So we realized that the membership data, we have to do some matching. So then what did we do? We matched the average ticket size to the income level. And we said, okay, this is not relevant for us in terms of any campaign, any meaningfulness and so on, right? So again, thick data used 15 years back without the concept of thick data. But in both Vijay's case and my case, it produced a major impact, right? So Shyamalji, if there are no questions, we'll proceed.
Yes, there are no questions.
Okay, let's go ahead, Vijay. So, but here's the thing, right? Now let's talking like an IT guy.
We have about 15 minutes.
Yes, thank you. And so at the end of the day, thick data means first you combine data science and anthropology, what is called ethnography. Okay? It is qualitative information that provides insights into preferences and behaviors, which is generally not obvious unless you're somebody like Motherboard, who then focuses on that. But again, using data, it senses this mom might be depressed or this mom might be chirpy at this point, right? Do not ignore the anomalies, right? Some mother has been buying, and then suddenly she stops buying. Somebody stopped buying sugar, right? Don't ignore them because they might. Today, data science can qualify anomalies as outliers or novelty. You can actually scientifically identify. So you take big data, that's 70, 80, 90% of data showing trends, what has happened historically and which way are we heading, right? Take the anomalies, use data science to identify if it's an outlier or novelty. Those are the two terms used in data science today. The science has emerged now. So you can say this is an outlier, let's forget it. Or this is a novelty. We have to explore this, right? And you have to work with the business guys here, that whole collaboration thing. Otherwise, okay, I'll come to that. They will typically not want to spend time on outliers, but you tell them, hey, look, I'm analyzing it. I'll classify them for you with data, right? This anomalies tell you where to look in big data, which is what Netflix did. Add human insights to data insights and identify, okay, smartphone is an anomaly, but let's verify people's phone things are increasing. We're talking about people living in slums of China who are eating momos for dinner are spending 2 to 3 months of salary to buy an iPhone. So there is a trend emerging that needs to be explored. And that is a message Tricia Wong gave and that was missed, right? Can you go to the next slide? Vijay, can you go to the next? Yeah. So here is a bottom line, right? Thick data will not change your business as usual. What you do today, you will have to keep on doing. Maintaining systems, building systems, upgrading systems, doing any big data work if you're doing ERP, etc. We're talking about doing something additional. Like I said, and I cannot keep on overemphasizing this. I can't overemphasize this. Don't ignore the anomalies in the data, because that's where you will find the future happening. That's where you will see, like Vijay said, trends are emerging. People are changing their habits, right? I mean, I'll give you my example. I used to wear only white shirts in a formal setting. As my daughters grew up, and they knew the shop would call me every 6 months to say, Mr. Jain, this was in US when I was in US, should I send you 2 more shirts, right? Yeah, of course. As my daughters grew up, they said, Dad, you're so boring. Why don't you wear light colored shirts? And my preference changed right there, right? And if they had not noticed it, and they said, oh, Akash always buys white shirt. One day he bought a pastel pink shirt. Let's ignore it. The problem is I'm buying pastel shirts now all the time. I hardly have any white shirt left. So do not ignore the anomalies. They will be novelty, they will be trends. And science exists. Use collaboration, data science, field workers, sociologists, right? Do the labeling and then do that. The last thing that Vijay and I, second last thing, that Vijay and I always talk about in various of our publications also, you obviously have to have good data in your system. I'm not going to emphasize or talk about that a lot because we all know that. Having bad data in the system will give you bad data insight and will give you bad thick data insight, right? A classic example is Afghan army said they have 30,000 soldiers, Taliban won't win, and we know what's happening. Last thing, be scientific, not emotional. The emotions are with the users. The supply chain guy loves his processes, his parallel, he's passionate about it. You be passionate about data. You be passionate about thick data and be scientific. Don't go and tell him 50,000 customers are not buying sugar, right? He'll say, okay, but I have 4.5 million buying it, right? So, but you give data, right? For say, another example is COVID response in many countries, or the denial of climate agreements. In spite of massive data evidence collected over time, and there were pointers coming up saying that this climate is going to go south, the whole climate scenario, and it started to go in paths. There were pointers that it will happen in this path. There were pointers that Antarctica's ice will start melting, which is now melting. Now that is actually happening, we are not seeing, right? And that's the problem. So I'll give you another example. Yeah, we have 10 minutes. We're almost done. Walmart, one of the biggest retailers, they did a study. There's a presentation or a 1 hour webinar with MIT, Sloan Management School, right? Where they say, they start by saying during COVID, Walmart was able to rejig the entire supply chain overnight because the whole supply thing changed, right? Now, the whole toilet paper thing we know, sanitizers are required, more soap is required. Why were they able to do that? Because they were the only ones who could handle the situation in a cyclone. And the entire town is destroyed, right? They would move water, they would move cereal, they would move milk. And they did it by analyzing climate data. And they said they knew before the weatherman, there's likely to be a cyclone in Connecticut next month, right? They started rejigging. The moment lockdown started happening for COVID, they knew this is not going away. They did some projections, they did how much thing we have, and they said, okay, people right now saying it's like flu, it will go away. They knew. They rejigged entire supply chain across US. So you can find toilet paper, you can find water, you can find milk at all times in every store. For example, cereal, right? They started home delivery as a result of that. And now they're giving Amazon a run for their money in both the business because they can ship from the store. Every store is a warehouse, and it's in practically every city of US. So that's what happened. You have to be scientific and not say, oh, epidemic, oh, try to convince. No, work with the business and say, I'm telling you, this epidemic is not going on. I'm telling you, there's a cyclone coming in this part of the country. And it's coming 1 month from now. Okay. What is the worst case? You store extra water there, you can move it back, right? So you have to be scientific about that. Because, yeah, we can go to the last slide.
So I just wanted to add a couple of points.
Yeah.
I think the last slide is the last slide.
Mhm.
We were talking about this, and we had discussed, subject to the availability of time, adding this point, Akash, about what it means to the CIO of today, right? We discussed, or we had a view, and this is only a view, it's not empirical evidence. So please, forgive us for our, shall we say,
like I said,
so
I mean, sorry.
So to the audience that we might be a bit, whatever we're saying are our own views. So in the era of digital transformation, the business ecosystem is really like a web. It's both like a web and a honeycomb. It's a very complex structure. It is not linear in any sense. Things are moving in various directions.
Correct.
And as a CIO, it has never happened before. There was an earlier era where the finance CFO was the center of the organization. Today, in every respect, and I come from the business end of it, I see that the CIO is actually at the center of the organization because everything is flowing through information and data streams. Now, the CIO is at the center of action and really the person who can make or break the organization. It is entirely up to the CIO to imagine her own ability to transform the organization. So when you have concepts like big data, and you also have enablers, new enablers like edge computing, where real-time agile real-time has taken a new meaning with edge computing, right? So my view, and Akash, you could maybe agree or disagree with that. The point being made here is CIOs can actually reposition and refashion their own organization. I ask, why can't a CIO have a marketing and a qualitative research-oriented marketing person in her data science team? Why can't that person have the ability to nudge and push out data which the hardcore stats-oriented data analysts are working on? Second, the CIO also has a bottom line issue that data is a very expensive project today. And it's not only the opportunity from it, it is the cost of it also. So why can't a CIO reimagine her own organization to include all these people? So you don't have to wait like Akash did for a meeting with the retail person. You can yourself do that And if your organization has the culture of collaboration and innovation, this is what I would expect my organization to do. If I was running an organization today, I would expect my CIO to compete with my marketing team or my strategy team to enable everything. So that's the point I wanted to make.
Correct, correct. Like I said, basically the fundamental thing is maybe have a person who understands a little bit of social science. You don't have to have a PhD, and whose only job is to whatever is not included in reports or big data for that matter is looked at and use the data science. I'm telling you, this model exists. It is just hard statistics. So you have to have a little statistical bent of mind to say, is this an outlier or novelty? Then take this data and the model, right? What we call in machine learning, you have to have provability. You have to say, hey, this is why I'm saying there will be a cyclone 1 month from now. This is why I'm saying there will be no epidemic. Epidemic will not be gone, right? So you have to have provability and you have to be able to do that. Okay,
So
I think
shall we move to the last slide?
Yeah.
We have
So
3 minutes left.
Yes. So basically, here's the bottom line, right? Humans are the end customer for any business that any organization that you guys are associated. They are not thinking machines. They are not feeling machines, right? They are rather feeling machines that think. So it starts with human sights. Human sights, insights change, and then the data starts changing. If you wait for data to start changing and not look at human insights, you might miss the bus. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay and Akash. So I have one question.
Yes.
So the examples that you gave about your shirt or about Walmart planning, so they are the outlier or they are the novelty or the odd thing led to decisions. Sometimes that is not possible, but these things could throw up interesting questions. You have to investigate those questions to arrive at the decision. So unless people spread away take this, if people jump into decision, it might backfire as well. So you have to properly investigate and see. In some cases, probably yes. So you could find a new trend from the data itself, and sometimes maybe it throws a question. So I just wanted your comment on that.
Sure. So quickly, let's see, there are two parts to this answer. Firstly, the data science today exists to say it's an outlier or novelty. You can scientifically prove it.
Yes.
Number two, so you could tell, let's go to my shirt example, right? Now I've been buying white shirts for 5 years. Then I buy a pastel shirt, then I buy a light gray shirt, right? So the science will say this guy is a novelty, okay? This guy is changing his trend, right? So how you handle the novelty is by a POC. Run a POC with business, saying, I think this is emerging.
There is a question. There is a question from audience, from Mr. Subodh Padnis. How can big data and thick data contribute to each other?
See, okay. So you have first big data. You do whatever you do with big data, right? I'm not going to elaborate on that. Thick data is what is left out of big data. So then you do the anomaly and outlier test. The science actually will
Sorry to interrupt you, Akash. I also just wanted to clarify this. Is thick data is what is left out of big data, or thick data is big data plus what is left out of
left out can be one. Left out can be one component. It can also be an interpretation of the big data.
Okay.
And I go back to big data to say, okay, is this an outlier or a novelty? That's how they work together. That's the statistics. And then I can run a POC and watch my data to say, okay, this is not working or not working.
Yes.
So they go hand in hand. They do not replace each other.
Absolutely.
They do not contradict each other.
Absolutely.
Thick data gives you trends, which big data will justify.
And if I may add to what Mr. Fadnis has asked, thick data can add value or can improve every aspect of all the V's of big data. Especially variety, especially veracity, for example. You can use thick data to examine whether the data is true and accurate and actually is measuring what it is by going and meeting the customers from whom the data has come from. It can add the value itself. Value is the end proposition. right? And velocity. We saw the example of the agile motherboard case. What is the point of velocity of data if it is not put to some use, right? All that mountains of real-time data. So thick data, which is essentially going and actually interacting with the point of contact, and we are only restricting to consumers, but human insights come also from supply chain of manufacturing. We're not gone into that. There are very deep cases there.
It could be even IT's own
Yeah.
network,
Absolutely.
statistics,
Even
on
network,
IT
absolutely.
operational statistics data. Yeah.
I can give you an example for one of the payments processing company I worked. They had this local servers all over the world, right? So they had one in Mumbai, right? Obviously, through which the local things are going, and then it's going to the US. This thing. It rained heavily one time in Mumbai, heavier than usual, and the basement got flooded. Right. So the server went down, but they have obviously backup and all because you can't shut down payments, right? But somebody sat up and said, all across the world, make sure it is in 4th or 5th floor. All the server rooms are shifted within 6 months. That's what it gives. You have to capture one. You can't say, oh, Mumbai rains, no problem. One time it happened, we were back on operation in 24 hours. You really can't afford that kind of thing. No? So that's why you go to big data and say, they actually switched to the competitors network. So Visa and MasterCard have a deal where if one server goes down, they take over the other party takes over as a backup, right? So, and they process the transaction. So the MasterCard can't keep paying Visa, for example, every time a server goes down, no?
Yeah. And Shyam, if I may add again the business of the social construct to this, the more we are dealing with technology and artificial intelligence and machine-oriented thinking, and the less we are interacting with the actual point of contact and the human interaction at the point where something is happening, we are tempted to go farther and farther away rather than closer. And Netflix was an example of actually doing the opposite, of saying, forget the big data, we're going into the house. We are doing so well with the big data, but it doesn't matter. We're going into the. So thick data is kind of is also a warning that don't forget the human side of whatever is being thrown in front of you.
Thank you. Thanks, Vijay and Akash, for this interesting session and introducing us to the concept of thick data. I think hopefully it is just the beginning. We'll take it further with some real maybe sessions or articles or maybe research on this topic. Very interesting topic. Thank you for sparing your time, and a big thank you to the audience for joining in and listening at the fag end of the day on a Saturday evening. So that shows the commitment. So thank you once again.
Okay, so thank you 9.9 and the audience.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone, 9.9 and our audience who's been so kind, and look forward to this program or this event being more and more successful. Thank you.
Thank you.